What is this gorgeous little dish I hold in my hand? It's a smoked paprika rosemary compound butter. I make this and 2 other delicious compound butters today in my low-carb kitchen. So what exactly is a compound butter if you're not familiar with them? All you're doing is you're adding seasonings, spices, something that adds flavor to butter to make it more delicious. That's all you're doing, and they're really easy to make. What I really like about making compound butters is there are occasions when I go very low carb, and so I'm eating less than 20 grams of carbs a day, but that means my fat content goes up. And so those days, 73% of my calories should be coming from healthy fats. Compound butters is a great way for me to add more healthy fats to my diet. It's a lot harder than you think when you're eating that many calories and fat. So let me show you 3 ways. 2 of them are going to have fresh herbs in them. 1 is going to have a little bit of a surprise element, but I'm going to make a roasted garlic and herb compound butter. And all I'm going to be adding is a stick of butter, so that's about ½ a cup. I have a bulb of roasted garlic. I have some fresh basil leaves, some curly parsley, and some chives that I'm going to go ahead and be chopping up pretty soon. I'm also going to be making a smoked paprika rosemary compound butter. With that, obviously, rosemary, fresh rosemary. I'm going to be using smoked paprika. I'm adding a little bit of sea salt. It's not this much. I just have that amount so I can show you what it is. Just a few pinches of it. Obviously butter. And then I'm also going to be adding hot sauce. Again, just a few dashes of this. It just helps boost the flavor even more. The last one I'm going to be making, maybe a little bit surprising because the secret ingredient is 100% pure maple syrup. Now, you may be thinking, maple syrup, you're low carb. Maple syrup is not low carb. That is true, it's not. However, the amount I'm using is so small, but it adds a lot of flavor to it. It is just a tablespoon of pure maple syrup, and that really is important. I'm also adding cinnamon and some nutmeg to it. ½ a cup of butter, that's 8 servings, so it comes out to under 2 carbs per serving. Now, with the maple cinnamon compound butter, I only use that for special occasions. And when I mean special occasions, because you can make anything a special occasion, it is on our wedding anniversary, I'll make us some ricotta pancakes and I'll just put a tablespoon of this butter on top of it. Or if for Thanksgiving, clearly Thanksgiving is a special occasion, if I'm doing a sweet potato mash, I'll serve it with this butter on top, and that's it. The nice thing about this is this type of butter stays in the fridge and it lasts for a very long time, for the shelf life of the butter pretty much, and we all know butter lasts a long time. When you're using fresh herbs, butter doesn't last that long, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But right now, I'm going to clear my area. I'm going to go ahead and start chop up the the herbs. You don't need to see all that. But when we come back, we'll go ahead and start making the butters. All right, I chopped up my herbs for the roasted garlic and herb compound butter I'm about to make. Now, to mix the butter, you want to make sure your butter is at room temperature. You want it soft, otherwise it ain't going to work, or it's going to be very frustrating real fast. There's a couple of ways you can mix it. One is you can use a food processor to mix everything, really chop everything up and dice it all up. I tend to use that if I'm using a pound of butter, so in other words, 4 sticks of butter. Otherwise, I'm doing 1 stick, which is ½ a cup. You don't really need to use that. You could use a hand mixer. I have one out here. I'm not going to use this today, but this does make the butter very, very fluffy, which is always very good and very nice. I'm going old school. I'm using a fork and a bowl, and I'm just going to whip it all together with my trusty fork and the power of my hand and my wrist. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and squeeze the garlic, the roasted garlic. I have a video on how to make roasted garlic, and I'll link to that below. I'm adding this first simply because I want to break apart the garlic, and I want to make sure none of the garlic paper that they are all sitting in come off on any of the garlic. So I want to make sure it's very clean. Last thing you want to do is to bite into your butter, take a bite of the butter, and sure enough, you get some rough paper in there. That's just not nice. So I'll put that in my pocket. So I'm not seeing anything like that. Oop, there is one leaf of paper. So that's always a good thing to go ahead and do that. So now what I'm going to do is just start smashing up the garlic. As you can see, it smashes up pretty easily. It's still going to be a bit chunky nonetheless, but this is for the flavor. So now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to add the butter. Yummy, delicious, creamy butter. As far as butter of choice, that really is up to you. I'm using Kerrygold, so it's grass-fed butter, and I do find that it tastes better than regular butter. I'm not sure what grass-feeding cow does to the cow's milk, but it does seem to taste better. It also seems to melt faster or get soft faster. It is a little bit pricey, so that really is up to you. It's about $1.50 more expensive than getting a full block of butter that I normally get at the grocery store. So I go with both, but when I'm making this, I use the real thing, which is the Kerrygold grass-fed butter. I just added in all my herbs, and now I'm just going to start mashing everything together. Hang on to the bowl because it will move around. All right, I have everything all combined. It smells wonderful right now. That garlic scent is really hitting me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to get started. I'm going to clean up a little bit, and I'm going to get started on the next butter. But I'll show you near the end how I actually store these. Now, because I'm using fresh herbs and fresh or roasted garlic, but fresh herbs with this particular butter, if you can put it in your fridge, it'll harden just like regular butter hardens, no different. However, because I'm using fresh ingredients, it only lasts about 5 to 7 days in the fridge. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to make them, use them. However, you can reserve it for quite a few months in the freezer. And the nice thing about when you're putting it in the freezer, you can take it out of the freezer, let it get soft, cut off what you need, and then put it back in the freezer. You don't have to worry about taking it in and out of the freezer with other foods, obviously, and it refreezing. That's the wonder of butter. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead, clean up this area, and then I'm going to start on the next compound butter. All right, I'm starting the second one. I've already added my butter to the dish. I'm smashing it a little bit because I'm going to put the ingredients smack dab right in there. Actually, that's not a good idea. So I've got my smoked paprika. I'm using about a tablespoon of that. A tablespoon of chopped up rosemary. I try to mince it really finely, but I don't mind a few chunks in there too. So the consistency is up to you, but I am using a tablespoon of fresh rosemary. And then for the sea salt, I'm not adding in all of the sea salt. I'm only going to add in about half a teaspoon of sea salt in there. Again, to give it a little flavor. So obviously the butter I'm using here, since I'm adding salt, is unsalted. That's really important. You never want to add salt if you've already got salt in it. Anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and mix. So I'm just about done mixing this, and what you want to make sure, since you're using something like smoked paprika, which changes the color of the butter clearly to a nice pretty orange, what you want to do is I use my little scraper here. Whoops, that's going to go back in. But what I like to do is I use my little scraper to make sure and just sort of flatten things out, because what you don't want to see is any of the yellow of the butter or chunks of solid red from the smoked paprika. So we're actually all clear here. I'm going to get this guy back up in here. And what I'm going to do is, again, just like the first compound butter I made, I'm going to go ahead and add this to a bowl, and then I'm going to clean up and get ready to do my maple syrup compound butter. Slight boo-boo. I put my butter in there, forgot to add the hot sauce. So I'm going to go ahead. I just add a few dashes. A little bit more than a few. But I tasted it and I realized, oh, what was I thinking? I forgot the hot sauce. Needs a little bit more of a kick. So I'm going to go ahead, mix it up, and then get it in a bowl. All right. I went ahead, a little bit ahead, and I have already patted out my butter. I'm going to add my nutmeg, all up in there, cinnamon, and I'm basically doing about 3/4 of a teaspoon of cinnamon and 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, so not a whole lot. And now here comes something I'm not going to forget, unlike the hot sauce, but I'm going to add 1 tablespoon, oh, sweet, of 100% pure maple syrup. Really important. This does have carbs in it, so you want to use this sparingly. So I'm going to go ahead and mix it all together. Okay, I've got everything all really well mixed. I will say when I'm using a liquid like maple syrup, or you can certainly use like lemon juice, lime juice, orange juice, although I don't recommend the orange juice. What I like to do is I'll start with the fork to mix it up, but I do like to go to the big spatula simply because the liquid can sometimes pool at the bottom and you really want to make sure it mixes well with the fat. I'm going to put this aside, clean up, and I'll show you how I store them in my fridge or freezer. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start prepping these for storage. So with the cinnamon maple compound butter, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead right now and put it in just basic Tupperware. It's going to go in my fridge. I want it to get a little firm. With the maple syrup, it's a really creamy texture to the butter. Not a bad thing, makes it taste delicious, but I want it to firm up a little bit before I actually store it in the freezer. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that with my garlic butter. This particular one, the rosemary and smoked paprika, this one I'm actually going to have in my fridge because we're going to be using this all week long. So I'm just going to store this in Tupperware in my fridge, and this will be gone within 5 days, no problem. Now, when you're freezing them, you want to wrap them in plastic wrap. I'm going to show you how. Hopefully I got enough plastic because I am running low. I'm just going to pull it out. I have my gloves because I'm actually going to work with the butter a little bit. Let me get this all straightened out. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the butter, I'm going to put it on the plastic wrap. Boom. Let's get a little bit more. And what I'm going to do with it, I'm using gloves, kitchen food prep gloves. You can use your hands if you like. I'm getting it close to the edge as possible of the plastic wrap. But what I'm going to do is take it and just start forming a log. Just shape it a little bit into a log. Don't worry about it. I'm going to take my gloves off now. It's pretty firm. What I'm going to just do is just wrap it as tight as I can in the plastic wrap. And I shape it as I go. And I'm just sort of going to roll it. Because again, you want it into a nice, firm, pretty even log. Try to be as even as you possibly can. Just fold it over, so now you have a log. So this way, when you take it out of the freezer, you can just chop off what you need. And I'm now going to wrap it in tin foil. Why the tin foil? Well, butter easily picks up any type of smelly type stuff in your freezer or fridge. So you want to make sure it's sealed very well. Any opportunity to roll it into your log works really, really well. I'm just going to give it a quick twist at the end. And now it's going to go in. It's good for 2 to 3 months in the freezer. You can use parchment paper, but I would recommend you use it for the fridge, shaping it into a log. You do want to use a magic marker and write down the date so you know in 2 to 3 months this is going to be shot. So with that, I hope you give compound butters a try to sort of jazz up your dishes that you think are a little too routine, or your veggies that you think are too routine. If you like what you see, subscribe, share with your friends, and let me know if you like to make compound butters or if you plan to do some, and what types of seasonings and flavors you're thinking about adding to them to make them yummy and delicious. Until then, I'll see you next time.